Washington Journal continues.
Our guest now is Dr. Jill Stein. She is one of those running for presidential candidate under the Green Party banner. Dr. Jill Stein, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be with you.
So tell us a little bit about the Green Party. What is the Green Party? What does it stand for?
So the Green Party is the only national party that does not take corporate money. So we are a party that is truly of, by, and for the people, and we stand up for those things that people are really desperate for right now. That is good jobs at living wages. We actually talk about not only the right to a living wage, but the right to a job, the right to health care, the right to education, including through higher education. This election, many candidates are calling for free public higher education, or shall we say the president is, and Hillary Clinton sort of, but certainly Bernie Sanders is. But we've been on that for at least a decade or more. Furthermore, we call for canceling student debt. We bailed out the bankers. We're saying it's time to bail out the students. They're the victims of that waste, fraud, and abuse on Wall Street, you know, which we saw fit to bail out. We're calling for health care as a human right through a Medicare for all system, which will actually save us enough money to cover everyone comprehensively. And we call for actually a foreign policy, believe it or not, based on international law, human rights, and diplomacy. And in addition, let me say, we call for greening our energy system. In fact, we call for a New Deal type program, which will put everyone back to work like we did during the Great Depression. We had a New Deal then. We're calling for a Green New Deal now, which will not only solve the crisis of the economy and jumpstart the economy, but it will also transform us to a green economy that basically turns the tide on climate change. And the spin-off of that is that it also allows us to pull back on these wars for oil, which have been so catastrophic and disastrous, have cost the average household $75,000 by the time this war cost is paid off, the war of the past 15 years, which shows no sign of success and no sign of abating. In fact, we're plunging headlong into more of them as we continue to send troops now to Nigeria, I heard, as of yesterday. You know, so this war on terror is only creating more terror, creating failed states, making terrorist groups stronger, and creating a massive refugee migration. And I should also say out front that we call for actually creating a welcoming path to citizenship for those hard-working, undocumented Americans who are actually a major part of the vitality and the diversity of both our economies, our culture, and our community. And, you know, in terms of the crisis, and we do have a crisis of immigration, the most critical thing that we can do is actually stop causing it, because so many of the immigrants who've come here, who flooded here to the U.S., as well as what we're seeing in Europe now, as well as throughout the Middle East, we're seeing massive refugee migration, 60 million people in the last year alone. It's absolutely crisis proportions. But this is in response to the wars that we've created. In South America, it's the coups and the military interventions and the death squads that we've actually trained here in the United States, as well as the CIA-supported coups, which have destabilized governments. In addition, the war on drugs, you know, has killed over 100,000 people in Mexico alone. NAFTA put over 1 million farmers as well as workers out of work. So we've basically forced people to become refugees and then criminalize them when they get here.
Well, you've mentioned a wide panoply of issues here: trade deals, immigration, healthcare, student debt. Most people sort of associate the Green Party with environmental issues, but it sounds like you guys have broadened far beyond that.
Far beyond, because, you know, for those who came into the Green Party on account of environmental issues, we quickly saw that you cannot create environmental justice unless you also have economic justice. How can you talk about a climate crisis, which may be decades off? It's getting closer all the time. But for most people, the crisis is, how do I keep a roof over my heads? How do I get my kids through school? The schools are being privatized and closed right and left. And then our younger generation is held hostage by this outrageous debt. So these are things we can fix. And so the Green Party has really become a party of democracy and justice. And if you had to say what is our motto, you could say it's that we need a world and an America that works for all of us and that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. Right now we have a profiteering economy and a set of profiteering big political parties that are getting their money from predatory banks, from fossil fuel giants, and from war profiteers.
And you mentioned that the Green Party does not accept any corporate donations at
That's
all.
right.
Where do you guys get your funding?
From everyday people out there, just, you know, regular folks who are struggling to keep their heads above water. So we're largely a tiny donor campaign, and largely through the internet and through our website.
And we want to let our viewers know that they can join in the conversation with Dr. Jill Stein here. Here's how we're breaking down the phone lines. For this segment, Republicans, the number for you is 202-748-8001. Democrats, your line is 202-748-8000. Independents, your number is 202-748-8002. And if you are a third-party voter, any third-party voter, you can call us at 202-748-8003. Don't forget, you can send us tweets. We're on Twitter. The handle's at C-SPAN WJ, and we are on Facebook as well. Again, we're speaking with Dr. Jill Stein. She is one of the presidential candidates within the Green Party. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your platform within the Green Party while you're running for president?
Great. So I'm by training and by profession, I'm a medical doctor. And now I explain to people I'm basically practicing political medicine after decades in clinical medicine. And the reason for that is that politics is the mother of all illnesses. And what I discovered as a doc in the clinic is that we're seeing these absolute epidemics of things we shouldn't be having. You know, everything from, you know, diabetes, and I work in I was working in a college clinic for most of my career, so I saw people kind of at the transition of childhood and adulthood, seeing things we never saw before in young people. An epidemic of cancer, of learning disabilities, asthma, the skyrocketing rates of asthma, heart disease, high blood pressure, you name it, emphysema. We have a public health epidemic. I didn't feel good giving people pills and pushing them back out to the things that are making us sick to start with. Everything from a sick food system that mostly gives you, you know, food that's not healthy for you. That's what we subsidize, and we make it very expensive to eat healthy food. And by we, I mean, you know, our political parties that are basically in the pocket of the agribusiness food industry. Poverty, you know, homelessness, air pollution. These are the drivers. So I went to work with communities to try to fix things upstream. And I discovered even when we had great solutions like jobs, in clean renewable energy and in insulating our homes, things that would create far more jobs than what we have right now and pay people good wages in a way that's healthy for workers and for our communities, still the legislature wouldn't move on it. So I became part of a move to get money out of politics. We passed this by voter referendum because the legislature certainly wasn't going to do this, even in so-called progressive Massachusetts. And after we passed it, basically what the legislature did, which was 85% Democratic, was they turned around and they repealed this clean elections law, which would have allowed public funding so that doesn't force politicians to go into the hands of big money and incur, you know, debts to be repaid, which is what our political system is all about now. So, you know, I entered into the political fray, basically. I got tricked into it, is what happened back in 2002. The Green Party, I was not a political person because I really share the, you know, the kind of disdain for the politics that we have from the two major political parties. I didn't know that there was a politics of integrity out there. And the Green Party came to me and said, would you run for office, do what you're doing, continue to fight for good jobs and for health care and for a healthy environment around us.
And you've run for several public offices in Massachusetts, and you were also the Green Party presidential nominee in 2012 as well.
That's right.
We want to get into some of our callers' comments and questions now because the phone lines are on fire right now. So our first caller is Charles from Elko, Wisconsin on the independent line. Charles, go ahead.
Good morning. I just wanted to make the statement, ma'am, that Donald Trump is the only one who's really addressed the problem since it started, that the big money in this country is investing in China, and they're getting things made for pennies on the dollar, and this is the reason why all the jobs have left. It's not regulation and all this other stuff they're talking about. Something has to be done to address the trade deficit, and he's the only one that talks about it. And plus, I would like to say, when I listen to Hillary, when I listen to Bernie, and these people in their campaigning talk about the police injustices, and Donald Trump is the only one that's sticking up for our police departments and saying good things about them. Hillary and them make it sound like every time a police car drives through a black community that everybody runs, that the police are shooting at them or something.
Thank you, Charles. You raise a number of issues. First, I would just, remind you that Trump is one of those people who's taken his businesses offshore. So he's one of these big businessmen. He's part of the big money that's investing offshore because that enhances his bottom line. And although he's not taking money from other billionaires, he's one of those billionaires himself. So, he shares their interests, and why he seems to be a man of the people. In fact, if you look at his record, it's not so great. He doesn't treat his workers very well. He's a little bit hypocritical. He talks about, the immigrant problem, but he's been found to hire many undocumented immigrants himself. And I think his biggest, problem in my book is what he did with Trump University, which was it was a scam against, working class kids, and signed them up for a university that basically delivered nothing, and took tens of thousands of dollars for them, promising that he would be, personally involved. And at the end of the day, the students got to take a picture of a cardboard cutout of him. In my view, this is kind of Trump, be careful what you're buying here. Buyer beware. Take a deeper look, because it won't be the first time the American public has been fooled by someone who's very good at promoting themselves, but is actually very much a part of the system that he's criticizing.
So, does Donald Trump raise an interesting sort of dilemma for you as a third-party candidate? His momentum in his campaign, his ascendancy, has raised a lot of questions about whether we do need an extra party, a third party within this political system. He tweeted a few months ago that 68% of his supporters would vote for him if he departed the GOP and ran as an independent. So is there sort of an upside to Donald Trump's campaign for someone like you, raising awareness of the need for perhaps more than two political parties?
He may have said a few good things in passing, but on the whole, I think he's doing an awful lot of hate mongering and fear mongering, and I think that's not what we need. And yes, we need diversity, and I think we need political diversity. We need more voices and more choices. And yes, we can see that in Donald Trump. We also see that in Bernie Sanders, who's technically not a Democrat. And doesn't it just speak volumes about our political system that the two supercharged campaigns right now are people who are basically outside of these two political parties? And if you've been following the polls of the American public, in fact, the majority of voters now has divorced the Democratic and Republican parties. According to the Wall Street Journal, as far as I know, it's the most recent poll last summer, 50%, one out of every two of the American electorate has divorced the Democratic and Republican parties and is either independent or belongs to a small party. It's 21% that are Republican, 29% are Democrat. Why don't we include the other parties in this discussion? To my mind, this is the problem with our political system, that it really shuts down the voices that are true competitors. They're only allowing people who can squeeze themselves into the pigeonholes of the Democratic and Republican Party. There's a much greater diversity of agendas and policy platforms that I think would resonate enormously. In fact, when I was allowed, the one time I was allowed into a televised debate back in Massachusetts in 2002, when I was running against Mitt Romney for governor, that was the race I was tricked into running, we fought our way into a debate which took place in a TV studio, and I gave voice to the kinds of issues as I was talking about earlier, and they were completely marginalized inside that little TV studio. But when we walked out, I was mobbed by the press, who told me I had won the debate on the instant online viewer poll, which said to me, oh my God, this whole political thing is a scam because the system is quaking in their boots, that people should actually learn that they have real legitimate choices that would enable us to take our democracy and our future back.
A few related statistics. This Gallup poll shows that a majority in the U.S. maintain a need for a third party. They show that 60% of Americans believe that the U.S. should have a third political party, and that both Republican and Democratic parties do a poor job of representing the American people. Let's turn back to the phone lines. Henry from Fort Patriot, Michigan is calling now on the Democratic line. Henry, go ahead.
Good morning, ladies. That's Fort Gratiot,
Fort
Michigan.
Gratiot. Sorry about that.
No problem. Dr. Stein, President Barack Hussein Obama, whom I predict will probably go down in history as the last greatest president the United States has ever had, as a matter of fact, the greatest president the United States has ever had, kept his largest campaign promise to those of us who supported him twice. He showed us transparency. Your problem is that you are sane. You are Bernie Sanders. We are at a perfect inflection point in this country between business and labor. And the people of the United States of America on the right have rabies, and the people on the left are just Clinton zombies.
All right, Henry, we'll leave it there. Dr. Jill Stein?
Well, I'm not sure what the question was there, but, you know, I think, you know, about transparency, unfortunately, we haven't seen a lot of that. There may have been lip service for it, but, you know, this is an administration that has done more to, what shall we say, keep its own business rather quiet and to promote the spying and the lack of privacy on everyday American people. And I must also say that there's no one who has suffered more under the last 8 years than the African American community. Household wealth in the African American community was basically chopped in half by the way that the Wall Street crisis was handled. And you may remember Barack Obama at that time had an enormous mandate from his first election and had 2 Democratic houses of Congress. But what they chose to do when push came to shove was to bail out Wall Street instead of bailing out ordinary homeowners, people who were being evicted from their homes, especially in communities of color. And so, you know, there's an outrageous racial disparity in just about everything, and from health to education to basic, you know, survival and jobs and unemployment. It's just unconscionable what's going on now, and nobody suffered more than the African American community, who used to have 10 cents, if you can believe it, 10 cents of wealth for $1 that the average American had. The African American community only had 10 cents on the dollar. And during the Obama administration, that has dropped from 10 cents to 5 cents. So to my mind, this really underscores why we need a really different way forward that breaks from the Democratic and the Republican parties, who are really held hostage by their funders. The big predatory banks, who are bigger than ever and more liable to fail, more vulnerable, and they're going to take the whole economy down with them again unless we really stand up and change it. They're funded by the fossil fuel giants, and there we saw lip service from the Obama administration. We saw lip service for green energy, but what actually skyrocketed was the production of fossil fuels. We're in a more dangerous place now from the climate than ever. And the war. We had an absolute explosion of the war now, and the expenditures for the war, which is now 54% of our budget. The next biggest item in our budget is 7%. That tells you how much we are spending on these wars, which are not making us more safe, they are making us less safe.
Greg from Creedmoor, North Carolina is our next caller from the Republican line. Greg, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Stein, you properly pointed out that Bernie was a socialist, and you're you're farther left than what he is. and that's kind of communist. The reason why your policies don't resonate with the American citizens is because they don't appreciate communism whatsoever. They don't appreciate socialism.
All right, Greg, we hear you this morning. Do you want to point out this story as well from KTUL in Tulsa, Oklahoma's Green Party has endorsed Bernie Sanders. Can you talk a little bit about Sanders' surge and what that means for candidates like yourself?
Yeah, I mean, contrary to what Greg was saying, actually polls show now people don't care about the isms. You know, they really care about the way they're being thrown under the bus right now. They care about the fact that the jobs that have come back are low-wage, part-time, temporary jobs. People are living with enormous insecurity. There's an entire generation of young people who are basically locked into student debt with no way to get out of it in the current economy. We have, healthcare costs are skyrocketing. Obamacare has been great for insurance companies and for pharmaceutical companies, and if you're very, very poor, but it's been really awful for everybody else. And we have polls showing now that people don't care about the term socialism. It's not a, it's not a negative term the way it was for a certain older generation. For the younger generation that has come up living under predatory capitalism, they see that as the problem right now. And truth to tell, when the Green Party views are heard, they tend to resonate enormously, and we tend to win the debates, which is why the system tries to lock us out. As I mentioned, I was voted winner on the Instant Online Viewer poll in the televised debate that I was allowed to participate in 2002. So the evidence is actually to the contrary. Now, that, to my mind, explains the surge both behind Donald Trump and behind Bernie Sanders, because people are really throwing out this system. And as in that poll you mentioned, 60% of people, and this has been going on for years, have been clamoring for something different. We really need more voices and more choices. People are sort of tired of being led around by the nose, and manipulated about isms. People really care about what's the substance of your policy. Now in Oklahoma, yes, what happened there was that the party said, go ahead and vote in the Democratic primary, because we don't have a primary going on there anyhow, so it's no downside to us. And truth to tell, we do have a lot of synergy. Many of our supporters are also supporting Bernie, and they're waiting to see what's going to happen. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party has a long and very consistent track record that it will sideline its truly rebellious candidates, either through the superdelegates or through Super Tuesdays, or through smear campaigns like they did to Howard Dean, who they took down through this Dean Scream public relations campaign.
You mentioned that you're not on the ballot in Oklahoma, there's not a primary in Oklahoma. What is the process for getting on the ballot in the states for Green Party candidates?
So this is part of how the establishment suppresses political opposition. They make it very hard. You're grandfathered in. If you're Democrats and Republicans, you get covered by the media, you get in the debates, and you don't have to do work to get on the ballot. You're automatically on if you're already kind of in the system. If you're challenging the system, if you're outside of the system, then you have to collect signatures. Now, if you have very deep pockets, or if you have billionaires from the war industry or from the health insurance industry and they're supporting you, then you have the money to buy your way on. For us, it's largely volunteers. In the last race, we were on for almost 85% of voters. And in this race, we're on our way to at least that much and hopefully more. And I'd encourage people, if you want to have a real choice in this election, go to my website, jill2016.com, and join the team. And let's make sure you have a real choice for a real future.
And let's get back to the phone lines. Rob from Edgewater, Maryland is a third-party voter. Rob, what is your thought this morning?
Good morning. Yes, actually, I am a Green Party. I was registered Green Party back in the mid-'90s, and I got in for the same reason, environmental reasons, but also at the time I worked to stop nuclear weapons for a lobby group and overseas arms sales, things like that. So it's a total thing. But I just want to thank you for carrying the mantle. I voted for Ralph Nader. In hindsight, I don't know if that worked out great for the same issues, but I did support him. And and I'd just like to say, it seems like David, trying to fight Goliath. You've got, you're right on with, your motto and everything. But then listen, like the last call from North Carolina, people are so afraid of things, you know what I mean, in this country, the most powerful country, and all you have to do is say, oh, socialism, communism, and people are just cower, And the mainstream media, it kind of goes along with it. And like you said, third parties don't get any coverage. I mean, how do we really get the news to the people and educate people so that they're not afraid, of something different, something that's actually good for them?
All right, that's Raw from Edgewater, Maryland. Dr. Jill Stein, presidential candidate from the Green Party, is our guest right now. Can you talk a little bit, too, about getting onto the televised presidential debates?
Sure.
And you discussed how that was helpful for you in previous election cycles. Time magazine has this story about a lawsuit that has been filed by the group Level the Playing Field. They contend that a 15% threshold for appearing on the debates is too high. Reducing it alone would not make it any easier for a third party to participate. It proposes a playoff 6 months before the election to allow a third party contender with the highest poll numbers or most public signatures collected to participate in the debates. Critics argue that the runoff would become a de facto election, artificially boosting and also ran on one or the other side of the aisle and weakening one credible candidate over the other. What's going on here?
Actually, there are two legal cases, and I'm actually a plaintiff in the Level the Field case.
Okay.
And what that information doesn't clarify is that what the case tries to do is open up the process of the debates. It really challenges what is a private corporation right now. The Commission on Presidential Debates is actually a private corporation. It's masquerading as a public interest thing, but it's actually run by the Democratic and Republican parties. And in the words of the League of Women Voters, who quit back in the 1980s when the current arrangement was made, they said this is a fraud being perpetrated on the American voter, and it definitely is. What that case is really trying to do is to open up the debates and to have a different rule. Right now they use that 15% rule. But the remedy we haven't agreed on. So the remedy is actually not part of the case. So they happen to support getting in one third-party candidate through a particular process which would enable money to buy the candidate again. So we don't agree on the remedy. What we call for is a public interest commission on debates. And for that to determine who gets in. And there's a very simple rule which has been used at least some of the time by the League of Women Voters, and that is if you're on the ballot, if a candidate is on the ballot for a majority of voters and could actually win the race, and there aren't very many of those candidates, then voters deserve to know. The idea is we not only have a right to vote, we have a right to know what our voting choices are. And to my mind, that would be a really fair way to do this, to allow the candidates who are legitimate, who could win numerically, to be in the debate. And if that rule were applied, there would typically be 4 or at most 5 candidates, and we could have a really interesting and challenging debate. That's what we're fighting for. And again, I'd encourage people to go to our website because we will be doing specific campaigns and actions to draw attention to this. And I just want to speak to Rob's question about how do we get heard. So debates is part of that. But let me also say there's a lot that can happen now on social media through so-called guerrilla media campaigns. And if you look at the number of young people who are now locked into student debt without any way to get out of it, it's not only young people, it's now also middle-aged people. It's 43 million people. That is enough to win a 3-way presidential race. And there's only one candidate who will cancel student debt, and you're looking at her right now. So if word gets out that people who are in debt can actually go to the polls and cancel their debt by voting green in the presidential election, we actually have the numbers to make that happen. And that is a campaign that we are just now beginning to undertake. We'll be setting up campus chapters and also high school chapters and getting the word out to young people that there is a way forward. Right now, the Democrats and Republicans don't differ on student debt, and it gets more oppressive and predatory all the time. But we have a clear way out here, and that alone can completely change the dynamics of this presidential race and actually win it.
Jeff from Fresno, California is calling on the independent line. Jeff, go ahead.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning, Jeff.
First of all, I want to say something about health care reform. I'm 51 years old. I've been paid attention to politics since about the 1980 election. I don't ever remember any Republican administration, congressman, senator ever proposing anything meaningful for health care for all Americans. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't believe in free health care. I believe we should all pay into it. Now, having said that, I work in an emergency room, and I swear, probably about 30% of the people that go to the emergency room go for the stupidest things, but they have free health care. Free health care. Now, I believe the president made an earnest effort at covering all Americans, but the way it's paid for, I mean, it's not sustainable, but I believe he made an honest effort. It needs modification. But everybody needs to pay into it. Everybody needs to be responsible. I believe in sin taxes myself to pay for things.
Right,
I mean, as far as, things that are unhealthy. Anyway.
Jeff from Fresno, California, we hear you this morning. Dr. Jill Stein?
So 2 points I'd like to make, Jeff. Number one is that we can cover everyone. A lot of the reason, and as a medical doctor myself, and I've worked in ERs, a lot of the reason that people go to the ER is because they don't have any other option for health care. They don't have health care which is accessible and affordable and open during the hours that they can make it and so on. So, we need a healthcare system for people. Right now it's a healthcare system for profit. And the health insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies, they're making out like bandits. And we've got a ton of healthcare administrators and bureaucrats right now. And that's not where our healthcare dollars should be going. It turns out if we actually spent our healthcare dollars on healthcare, we would have more than enough to cover everyone and to cover everyone comprehensively. And we can do that basically by creating an improved Medicare for all system, and it puts choice back into your hands. It puts control over your healthcare decisions. So that's one point I want to make, is that we can do this and we can pay for it. Of course, if there's no such thing as a free anything, but we can pay for it in a way that's just. And I think that healthcare is a human right. It is in all other developed and civilized countries around the world. It's about time that the richest nation in the world join the community of nations and do it right. But the other point I want to make is really important, and that is so many of our health expenditures result from the fact that, to put this bluntly, corporate America is making us very sick. And whether that's from our pollution system, our system of fossil fuel energy, which is contributing enormously to the asthma epidemic, heart disease, strokes, cancers, you name it. We're very sick from that. We're very sick from a food system that makes healthy food extremely expensive and hard to get, creates food deserts, and a transportation system that makes it dangerous to walk or bike to school or to work. These are things that we used to do as part of being healthy. And what we find is that if you go to a green economy that has clean energy, gets rid of pollution, that has a healthy, affordable, sustainable food system, and that has public transportation which dovetails with being able to walk to the transit center or to bike to it, kids can walk to school, builds exercise and activity back into our lives and the design of our communities. If we do that, suddenly your healthcare costs drop. We spend $1 trillion a year on the military, but we spend $3 trillion a year on a system which is not really a healthcare system, it's a sick care system. And this isn't just like a theory. This actually happened in the country of Cuba when their oil pipeline went down at the time that the Soviet Union collapsed. Suddenly their death rate from diabetes went down 50%. Their death rate from heart attack and strokes went down by 1/3. They had a health miracle. And how much did they spend on it? Zero. We spend $3 trillion a year and we're just getting sicker because we've got a sick energy, food, and transportation system. This is what our Green New Deal calls for, and it actually pays for itself through the health benefits alone.
Our next caller comes from New York, and it's Linda on the Democratic line. Linda, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I've been a Democrat 45 years. I'm supporting Bernie Sanders. I used to drink the Clinton Kool-Aid. They did a few good things when they were in, but the majority of their policies, if you look at them carefully, hurt so many more middle-class Americans and poor Americans. And recently, Hillary, when she was at some kind of an event, a young black girl stood up with a sign. that said, we have to make them heal. Those were Hillary's words about the drug dealers or whoever she was talking about. And the black girl said, I want an apology for all the young people that were incarcerated under Clinton's criminal justice bill. Now, Hillary's campaign, they said, oh, she's not responsible for her husband's policy. Well, there was a picture of her right there endorsing it, right on film. So, you know, when she said she wants to make them heal, did they go after the suppliers of the drug dealers, the big guys? No. It was the young boys and girls that ended up in jail. And I want to see the transcripts of her speech to Wall Street and see how much it's in line with the needs of the American people.
Well said, Linda. I couldn't agree with you more. I think, you know, Hillary is very much a part of the problem. She's changed her tune now that she's been challenged by Bernie Sanders. But she's really, you know, she's the creature of the big banks. She was on the Walmart board, and there's no, you know, no corporation that has been more harsh to workers and to women than Walmart. She was a big advocate for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. She's been a big advocate for dirty energy as Secretary of State. So she has a track record, and although she may talk the talk, she's not going to walk the walk. And, you know, I'd say I very much support Bernie's policies. Where I differ from Bernie, though, is that, you know, it's hard to have a revolutionary campaign and a counter-revolutionary party. And it's been tried before. And when George McGovern actually won as a peace candidate, won the nomination back in 1972, the Democratic Party changed its rules, and they are going to use those rules against Bernie Sanders in the same way that they used them against Dennis Kucinich, and they redistricted him. They used it against Howard Dean with a smear campaign, against Jesse Jackson after he had won 12 major Midwestern primaries. You know, and there have been efforts to really reform the Democratic Party and make it more like a social democratic party of Europe. And it didn't work, basically because the war machine took a hold of the party and created the war in Vietnam and really broke up that reform movement. And that's still going to happen, unfortunately. While Bernie has a pretty good agenda, at least domestically, I have some differences with him on foreign policy, where he basically, you know, still supports the war machine. And the outrageous military budget, which is robbing us blind. You know, we agree very much domestically, but the Democratic Party, you know, I'd say stay tuned, and you may need another place to go. For many of Bernie's supporters, we are Plan B. And for others, we're Plan A, because they know that the Democratic Party, even if Bernie were to win, it would enormously constrain what he can do. You have to be willing to stand up and fight the predator and to call it what it is, in order for us to get out of here alive. You know, it's not just the jobs, it's not just the next crash on Wall Street, it's not just the debt that an entire generation is locked into. You know, it's the climate, which is crashing down on us right now, and we need real solutions. We, for example, have a specific solution that the president can implement right now to break up the big banks. This is the solution being articulated by Bill Black, the author of Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own It, who points out he was previously an enforcer during the savings and loan banking crisis some years ago. There used to be a system of criminal referrals whereby the crooks on Wall Street could be brought to justice. There is no such system right now. So we can restore those criminal referrals and also establish what are these minimum capital requirements, they're called, which basically says that the banks need to have the money on hand to handle the risk that they're taking. And if that were enforced, it would force the banks to downsize right now in a way that would save us from this next crash, which so many authorities agree we are teetering on the brink of.
Next caller, Robert from Henderson, Kentucky, on the third party line. Go ahead, Robert.
Yes, good morning, Miss Dr. Stein.
Good morning, Robert.
Thank you. I'm a black man, and I live in Henderson, Kentucky. I'm originally from L.A. I'm 53 years old, and I've observed the political process for a very long time. I wrote in my local newspaper, vice president of my local NAACP, and currently I'm just an independent. I like to follow the candidate that speaks best to the issues that I believe will support our people in masses. Now, what I'm going to say is this. The Democratic Party has taken black people for granted for a very long time. Black people historically were Republicans. I don't see any of them speaking to the issues that affect black people. Not one time during the debate, the Republican debate, did they mention the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, where black people were being poisoned. Not one time did they mention the police brutality. Not one time did they mention mass incarceration. No party has paid attention to the black people of America. What would the Green Party do specifically to address our needs, particularly underemployment, unemployment, unjust systems and jurisprudence, and particularly do you have as far as sitting down with black leaders? Minister Farrakhan sat down with Alex Jones for an interview. Donald Trump will not sit down with Minister Farrakhan. You talked about the smearing of Jesse Jackson. Do you know that they used Minister Farrakhan to smear Jesse Jackson? Hillary Clinton used Minister Farrakhan to smear Barack Obama, and Clarence Thomas, they tried to smear him by he made some comments in support of Mr. Farrakhan.
All right, Robert, we'll have to leave it there so we can get in a few more calls. Go ahead, Dr. Jill Stein.
Robert, you raise really important issues, and thank you for that. The Green Party actually calls for a national action plan for racial justice now, and this was a plan in part developed by the Malcolm X Grassroots Institute, which you may be familiar with. They've done really great work fighting police brutality and calling for justice in both policing and in the criminal system. So, you know, we basically call for recognizing the violence and brutality of racism, not only in policing, as you say, but also in courts, in the prison system, and in the economy as a whole, where, as a rule, generally African Americans have or shall we say, twice the rate of unemployment as the rest of the economy. So the African American community has really been taking it on the chin, and it's been somewhat a continuous line from slavery to lynchings to Jim Crow to redlining to the war on drugs, and now police brutality, which is really not new. What's new is recording it on cell phone cameras. So it's really important that it be stopped. So to start with, we call for every community to have a citizen review board so that police can be watched and records evaluated and perpetrators addressed early on instead of allowed to be recurring offenders. We call for investigators, full-time investigators, so that every case of death and injury at the hands of police is investigated. We call for actually ending the war on drugs, which is a racist war on drugs and has filled the prisons, you know, with over 2 million people, a huge portion of which are nonviolent drug offenders. And as a medical doctor myself, you know, I'm well aware that if you want to deal with drug issues, first you have to deal with the economic hopelessness that's driving them, and secondly, you have to deal with substance abuse as a health problem, not as a criminal problem. That just creates recidivism. You have to deal with it as a health problem. So we call for ending the racist war on drugs and for treating these issues as health issues and discharging from prison the hundreds of thousands of African Americans and people of color, largely, who should not have been locked up in the first place. And then we call for a real economic initiative to ensure that the jobs are going first to the communities where they are most needed. That's the highest unemployment communities, which are definitely the communities of color.
Let's get in one final caller now for Dr. Jill Stein, and that'll be John from Saratoga Springs, New York, on the independent line. John, you have the last word.
Hi. I'm an independent, but I lean towards being libertarian. And my whole thing is I'll take a history lesson here. John Adams, the second president, wrote that the greatest evil to the Constitution would be a two-party system that pitted both sides against each other. And I'm 53 years old, so I can't understand these people that call C-SPAN supporting the Democrats and Republicans, and we never get anything. I mean, how long are you going to fall for this trick? You have these people calling, oh, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. For crying out loud, it's 2016, and we're drinking poisoned water. There's a poisoned water in Michigan. There's a problem upstate New York here. I mean, wake up, people. We need more parties. As a libertarian, I believe every party should be represented. Every person should be represented. It's just ridiculous
All
the
right.
way things are going, and the problems are never going to be solved with this system.
All right, John, we hear you. Dr. Jill Stein.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And in fact, the American people are clamoring for more voices and more choices. In the poll that you heard about at the very beginning, and in the fact that the campaigns that are really energized right now are the outsider campaigns inside of those two parties. So we need more voices and we need more choices for exactly the reason that you've pointed out, that the system really is collapsing on us right now, whether you're looking at the lousy jobs that don't pay living wages, the rather high and persistent rates of poverty, an entire generation that's locked into debt, skyrocketing costs of health care, these massive wars for oil that just keep expanding, making us bankrupt here at home, bankrupting us morally and spiritually, and making us the pariah of the international world, and the climate, which is melting down on us right now. So there are good solutions to all of these problems. A Green New Deal that will solve the problem of the economy and the climate and make the wars for oil obsolete, and it pays for itself because we get so much healthier by having a healthy food and energy and transportation system. We can have an international policy that's based on international law and human rights and on diplomacy and not on military and economic domination that's only producing failed states, worse terrorist threats, and massive refugee migrations. So these are problems we can solve, and we can mobilize a generation by canceling debt. Right now, if you know anybody out there who's in debt, let them know that there is a way that we can put an end to that debt right now. We did it for the bankers to the tune of $16 trillion and counting, according to the General Accounting Office. $16 trillion is what we have spent so far on basically free money and bailouts for the big banks. It would cost us about $1 trillion to do that for young people, and that would be a huge stimulus to our economy. And that is really where we get back on track to a future that will work for all of us, an America that will work for all of us, and a world that will work for all of us. It's up to us to stand up and reject this concept of lesser evil that tells us we have to be quiet. You know, for being quiet, we are being thrown under the bus. It's time for us to stand up and be as loud and as strong as we can and insist on a future that's going to work for all of us. So join me at Jill2016.com and let's make it happen.
Dr. Jill Stein is a Green Party presidential candidate. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. Great talking with you.
Coming up next,